Hey, Clemson family, a very gutsy performance from the Tigers in Charlotte last night. They are the ACC champions. They are in the playoff. I'm Bill Zimmerman. This is the Reign Supreme All podcast.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Just the two of us today. Jeremy and Micah couldn't be here, so can't wait to get all four of us on one of these at one point and talk about the Tigers. But what a win! I mean, what a the big lead, blowing the big lead. Feels like you're going to overtime. Adam Randall with the play of his life on the kickoff return, and then that kick. I know everybody's going to talk about the kick by Nolan Hauser, and rightfully so. And if there's ever a young man who you want to make that kick, it's a guy whose parents both were athletes at Clemson and his sister's an athlete at Clemson. How about that? And his dad played on a College World Series team. Now he's going to the college football playoff because of that kick. And I mean, Bill, that kick will go down with David Treadwell's two kicks against Georgia. Whatever, the Catanzaro kick against LSU, whatever kicks you want to talk about, that one will go right there with those for sure.
Yeah, and just the whole way the end of that game unfolded. Adam Randall, let's look at that guy too. All he's been through, all the injuries he's had to fight through, everything he's had to do. What, fourth string kick returner now? Because Mappa
Right.
hurt, Haynes got hurt, Isiamame fumbled, unfortunately. That's going to send the coach looking for the next option. And, usually my instinct is, oh, don't bring it out, don't bring it out. But about 20 seconds later, after that long run, I thought, like, you know what? As rough as this offense has had it in this fourth quarter, that's probably the most effective use of that time. I don't know how they would have covered 40 yards in 9 seconds the way that he did. 7 seconds, maybe, I think it was actually. I think they had nine
Yep.
seconds left for the completion
Right.
to Antonio. And then you just see Hooser loosening up on the sidelines, smiling. He gets out on the field, he smiles back at the sideline. Some people said he winked. You were saying it was a bit of a smirk, but he just had that it factor in clutch time. And you see that and you feel so good. And all of a sudden, I'm no longer thinking, boy, should they have a safety back behind Hooser in case it gets blocked? Then of course that hurts your coverage. You can't really afford to spare a guy back there. Did you ask Drew Sweeney to do some, or Clay Sweeney to do some push-ups so he could maybe tackle somebody if it gets blocked, race him down, bring him down? Because you don't want to lose the game in regulation. You want to send it to
Right.
overtime, even if you can't convert the kick. And man, I'll tell you what, it was just a beautiful kick. He got a little extra distance, I think, out of the fact that it had, I won't call it a hook, I'll use a golf term, right? Maybe a little bit of a draw down the field, but he had just enough to clear those uprights. And what an amazing moment. I'm laughing all over again. I had to laugh silently because Mrs. Clemson kickoff had gone to bed already. She had some plans early today. She needed to head in. And I just can't, after that crestfallen feeling in your gut of how that fourth quarter went with SMU coming back to tie it. They, maybe you and I talked about this a little bit, maybe they even milked a little clock to not have any time for Clemson to do anything after SMU scored. Lashley just looked confident. He was directing that offense. Jennings was executing, finding guys. That running back was spectacular. Whether you sent him out wide, sent him on a route, or asked him to carry the ball behind that line, the SMU offensive line gathered itself in that second half after a rocky first half. Jennings had to compose himself at halftime. He was clearly rattled in the first half. Just
Yep.
It was such a strong opening for the Tigers, and for them to make sure that they come out of that game with a win after that, especially after the way they lost the South Carolina game, that really has to cleanse the system a little bit.
Well, and it sure felt like if they went to overtime, they weren't going to win. Right. SMU had all the momentum in the world. And I mean, even Sean McDonough and Greg McElroy were talking on the broadcast. That's why you kick the extra point and don't go for two, is because you've got all the momentum. And Clemson had not done anything in the fourth quarter. And, then the kickoff return happens and everything flipped. I don't even know if Clemson even tries to go win the game if the ball is kicked through the end zone and they get the ball in the 25, right? Do they just run out the clock and try to refocus and recover for overtime? But Adam Randall and not even look just Adam Randall, the 10 guys blocking for him.
Yeah.
It's an 11 player unit, and they got it done. And then Hauser got it done. And I love the smirk. I just love it. I love it. There was, they called a timeout right after the Antonio Williams catch, and somebody said, "Hey, Hauser, knock this blank through," and you just see him just kind of relaxed and ready to go. And again, one of the biggest kicks in the history of Clemson football. And in that moment, for everything that kick meant, right? Like the David Treadwell kicks were great. You beat Georgia on a last second field goal. The second one was a shorter field goal. He should make that, right? But you still win the game. The Catanzaro kick, that field goal changed the trajectory of this program.
Truly.
Right. But this kick feels like it may be doing that. We'll see in the next 5 years, but this program has really dropped off the last few years. And we know the criticism from the outside, but there's something to be said for getting back to the playoff for a 7th time and winning the ACC 8 times in 10 years. And that kick made it happen. And it's just special. It's just special. And now you go get ready for Texas, man. Think about that, going to Austin, Texas to play a college football playoff game. I don't know that it gets much better than that for the first round.
Terrific city. I've been there. I've had family working there in PR for a Texas game. So it's an amazing place to be. I've even got a friend lobbying for me to maybe jump on a plane, head out there, go to the game with them. So we'll see if I can make that work. Let's talk about, speaking of Texas and Texans, Cade Klubnik. I've been a pretty big critic of his all year, at least in our text. We haven't been on the podcast as much this year, obviously, right. But I'll tell you what, boy, did he turn around everything that he had been doing wrong against South Carolina. His throws were on time. They were on target far, far, far more often than not. That offense was hitting on all cylinders during the first half. It moved the ball, and you just felt it wasn't even a swagger necessarily. It just felt natural, right? It just looked very natural. He wasn't trying too hard, which is something you and I have talked about. Receivers are where they needed to be. The line was providing nice protection. Something changed in the second half with what was going on that Clemson offensive line, because the amount of time that Klubnik had to operate really changed. And I really can't put those fourth quarter problems on him. You also know that D-line, once Maffa and Haynes were both hurt, was able to key on blitzing because there was not much of a run element to keep them honest otherwise in that regard. So these things all added up to what that fourth quarter was. But my goodness, the Clemson offense, for the most part in that game, really, really shone.
Well, and the throw to the second touchdown throw to Wesco is just as good a coverage. Throw. Yes, as good a throw as a college quarterback can make. I mean, it just is. The first one's wide open, right? I mean, any Division I college quarterback should be able to make that throw.
That was like what was it? Kelly Bryant was to Ray McLeod. I think it was against Louisvile one time. McLeod
one against Virginia Tech too, right?
That's the one, Virginia Tech. Nobody around for 30 yards. Right. Like everybody gave up on Wesco on that play.
Right. But I mean, it looked like it's supposed to be a running play. I'd have to go back and look and see if there were linemen downfield, because it sure looked like they were. But
no, they were within 3 yards. It seemed to me. I was surprised.
They didn't call it if they were. But the second one, man, it's take the snap. It's 3 steps. It's hit that back foot. It's throw it over the first defender right between the other two. Perfect spot. And you like, where is that all the time? Well, I mean, obviously no quarterback can do that all the time, but where is that more often? Right. I mean, that's what you want to see. And look, he just missed the one was it the third quarter where he missed Wesco down the seam on the, so just missed that one. I mean, that's a touchdown too. If it's half a yard tighter of a throw, that's a touchdown.
Right.
So that looked like the one against App State, to be honest, where it's right down the middle, right down the seam, and it's a touchdown. So, no, look, there were a lot of issues in the fourth quarter. It looked a lot like the South Carolina game for the fourth quarter. The defense couldn't get the key stops. The offense, when the defense did get the stops, couldn't do anything with it. And then the special teams, I mean, the punting game has just been not good this year. And when's the last time Clemson won the field position? It always feels like Clemson is backed up. And, then there's a 30-yard punt and the other team gets the ball at midfield. And so all of that said, they win the game. I'm flabbergasted by them winning that game. But, Bill, you tell me, I wanted to ask you about this as we were doing this. It feels like anything else that happens now is gravy.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, I know that that's not the expectation for a lot of Clemson fans. It's a lot of Clemson fans, the expectation now is 2015 to 2020, right? It's go to the playoff every year. It's win a national championship. Okay, that's fine. If you feel that way, you probably didn't grow up when you and I grew up.
No.
You didn't live through the Tommy West era and the Ken Hatfield era. I was there the night Tommy West got fired and had to interview some of those coaches. Wow. And it was not fun. But this feels like a turn back towards something. Dabo even said it last night in the post game in the locker room with the players. I think the Clemson social media posted it, or maybe the ACC did. They're not going to win a national title every year, right? That's just not realistic. But if they're winning 9, 10, 11 games every year and they're in the hunt, I don't know that you can expect more than that. Maybe you win it once a decade or whatever. But as long as you're in the hunt and you have a chance, I think that should be enough. Now, look, you know how I am. The South Carolina loss is bad. And I know South Carolina is really good this year, and they're playing as well as anybody in the SEC. And I don't think anybody would want South Carolina to be in this 12-team field, to be honest.
But and they're not. Yay!
They're right. They're not. You're right. But the Louisville loss, that shouldn't happen. You shouldn't play like that at home, right? Those things have got to stop. But they're in the playoff, and that's all that really matters now.
Yeah, there was one. I kind of had the broadcast still on after they announced the seeds for the playoff, and happened through the room when Dabo Swinney's interview was happening. So I kind of caught it, and he said, "Hey, here's your opportunity, here's your chance," and that's what it's all about. I think back, you mentioned something there going back to all the Tommy West and especially the end of the Ken Hatfield era. Tommy Bowden, I don't think gets enough credit for taking this program back to a point. And I remember I used to put it this way. I know I've said it to you. I started to feel again like going into kickoff every single week, Clemson had a chance to win. Now, there were years the FSU blitz just overwhelmed the offensive line, overwhelmed whoever was at quarterback, even with Taj Boyd, who was another one of those guys who really elevated this program and took it to another place. But under Tommy West, toward the end of the Ken Hatfield era, there were weeks where you just knew before kickoff. No, you knew it all week. They ain't going to win this week.
Yeah.
And Tommy Bowden got them to that 8, 9, 10 wins a year, on a shorter schedule.
Not 10. Don't say 10.
No, I know. In a shorter schedule, it was that 8 or 9,
yes.
Where the team was good enough every single week. Hey, Georgia Tech was really strong some of those years. And you always felt like, hey, they can win that game. South Carolina, you knew they could always win. Florida State, you knew that they had a shot to win that game every single time that they faced off in a year. So that was a nice elevation. And now what I'm thinking more about is 2022. And that team, I really think the body of work that team had overall was better than this team's body of work overall.
Sure.
And I don't really want the Louisville game to sully it that much, but I really do feel pretty negative about the just no showing, especially on offense that week against Louisville. That was a team. Hey, if you call 4 or 5 or 6 more running plays in that game, if you have one less fumble in that game, if you have one less bust in the secondary, any one of those factors that you could have, and you could probably name a couple more, Clemson wins that game instead of losing by a point. Everything went right for South Carolina, and so many things went wrong for Clemson in that game that team should have been able to pull off that win. And if they did, they were in the playoff. And all of a sudden, we're saying, hey, this is the eighth time in 10 years that Clemson is in the playoff. This team has been closer to elite, and this is not an elite team. They're getting there. I feel like, to your earlier point, they're starting to become elite again. And by the way, what would help that a lot? Win a playoff game, and Texas is gettable.
I think Texas is gettable too. I do. I think the teams that are hosting, I think Texas is gettable. I think Penn State's gettable. I think Ohio State's gettable. I think Notre Dame's probably the best of those teams. I do. Yeah. I love what Marcus Freeman has done at Notre Dame, and believe me, I'm no Notre Dame fan. Even as a Southern Catholic, I am not a Notre Dame fan. But Bill, there were a lot of people. I think Texas is gettable, and I was texting back and forth with somebody before the show started, and he said, where do you think they're going? Penn State? And I said, no, I think Texas. But I thought Clemson was going to be the 11 seed, and Texas would be the 6 seed, right? I thought Notre Dame would be the 5 seed, but now Clemson is the 12. You can't really argue with the 12 seed, other than, hey, they beat SMU and SMU's a spot ahead of you. But as far as resume, Clemson's got probably the worst resume in the whole bracket. But you know what? That doesn't matter.
Right.
How good was NC State's basketball resume in March? And they went to the Final Four. Yeah. Right? How good was Clemson? I mean, Clemson got blasted by Boston College.
We didn't talk about that at all, did we?
No. They got blasted by Boston College in the first round of the ACC tournament and then went to the Elite Eight. So, none of that matters now. But I look, there are going to be some people upset about 12 and playing at Texas, and Clemson didn't get a bye. Clemson didn't deserve a bye. They didn't deserve a bye. You can't jump Boise State. Right. You can't jump Arizona State. It's just not going to happen. So, if they had gone out and beaten SMU by 40 last night, maybe they jump one of those teams, but not the way that game turned out. And I think they got what they deserved. And again, what you said, Dabo said, they got a chance. And that's really all they deserve right now, is a chance. And, I was talking to my son Matt about this, just a few minutes ago before we started the podcast. He's like, Dad, wait, Wesco's a freshman, right? TJ's a freshman. Sammy Moore's a freshman.
Right.
I mean, Sammy Brown, not TJ Moore. Sammy Brown's a freshman. I said, yeah, Elijah Thurman's a freshman. I'm probably leaving somebody out there. And I know I am. I think they hit on that freshman class, right?
Ashton Hampton.
Hampton, right. Absolutely. Huge play last night on third down in that game. And so, there's a chance for this program to kind of grow back to being one of the top programs in the country. Bill, I don't think we'll ever see Clemson win 2 national titles in 3 years again. I don't. If we do, that's great. But I think we've lived through the peak. But that doesn't mean they're falling off the face of the earth and they're going to go back and win 5 or 6 games. Not as long as Dabo's there.
Right.
I think they're in really good shape. And I think back to your point, I know I veered off like 5 different lanes there. I think Texas can be had. I do think that, Quinn Ewers has not been great. He's hurt. I don't trust their offense. They lose to Georgia with the backup quarterback for most of the second half yesterday.
Yeah.
And don't do anything with that. I mean, you're handed a number 2 seed on a platter and you don't do anything with it. I think Clemson definitely can go there and win this game.
Anything else? I've watched a little bit of Texas, and I had them as my preseason number 1. I'll admit it. They sure don't look like that now, obviously. But what else have you noticed in watching Texas this year? Anything defensive line, or like what's kind of their receivers really stand out to me? And when Ewers gets the ball to them on time, he's fabulous. And I know he's nursing that ankle, maybe a couple of weeks of rest and electrodes and Osterine. I don't know how they treat guys out there in Texas, but maybe a couple of weeks of true rest are really going to get him rejuvenated. But what else do we need to look for with the Longhorns?
Their defensive line is really good, right? And I think that, very similar to what we've seen the last 2 weeks, South Carolina and SMU. So, you've got to protect Cade Klubnik. And I think the offensive line for 6 of the 8 quarters the last 2 weeks has protected Klubnik really, really well. I thought the offensive line played great against South Carolina.
I did too.
And they played pretty dang well for the first half last night. But so you got to continue that. But I think it's, again, get the ball out of his hands, find some kind of running game somehow. I don't know who that's with now, with Maffa hurt and Haynes out. Is it Hammerhead? I don't know. I don't know what they do at running back moving forward, but I know Maffa's going to gut it out. But look, their defensive line's really good. I think their secondary can be had a little bit. I know Makuba's over there, and Makuba played great yesterday.
Yeah. And they waived off that targeting at the end, right? So he'll play a full game?
Right. That wasn't targeting. Yeah, it was a good call. Well, I mean, he led with the shoulder and hit the guy in the hit the quarterback on the shoulder. So, and I don't know what targeting is anymore, to be honest. But
neither do the refs. That's okay.
Well, that's the problem, I think.
Yeah.
But but I don't know about, like, they don't scare me to death with their receivers. They don't scare me to death with their running backs. Other than Clemson's got a tackle.
Yeah.
And I thought they were better tackling last night.
Me too.
Now, Jennings isn't 240 pounds like Sellers, but I thought the defense played, and you said this before we started, I thought the defense, the whole team played 3 best quarters they've played all year in the first 3 quarters. And then something flipped in the fourth quarter, and they just stopped. I know we only have about 4.5 minutes left, so I'll stop talking here.
Well, I'll bring up one last thing to take us out then. And by the way, youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff. Subscribe to us there. We're on social media, Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, primarily at Clemson Kickoff. You know what jumped out at me about midway through the game? Klubnik, Brenningstool, Wesco, even Mickens, the Texan guys on our team were up for that game against SMU. And if that continues, some of the guys in the offensive line also from Texas, they can keep that up. If that continues, look who we're playing. They're going to be in their home state at that.
Well, Klubnik's hometown, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Klubnik's from Austin, right? Yeah.
Yep. So, you hope it goes better than when ETN went to New Orleans.
That didn't work out. I was there. That didn't work out well.
That was not great. I am really pleased to see that they bounced back so well from what could have been a really gutting loss and really fed off of Syracuse and Fran Brown. Shout out to Fran Brown, as Dabo Sweeney said last night, for getting Clemson in the ACC Championship game. They fed off of that energy. They fed off that excitement. They found a way to scrape themselves up and have, probably their best game of the year in my eyes. You and I just talked about that a little bit. So we will be back at you with a couple more episodes, hopefully between now and the game. We'll maybe start talking about basketball a little bit. Things are looking pretty good there. It's that time of year when basketball tends to look pretty good, but I think it looks even better than usual, grading on a curve for them looking good early in the year. So we'll talk about that. We'll try to get Micah back in there. Well, like you mentioned, we'll try to get Jeremy in here. Maybe some other guests. Who knows? Maybe we can get some guys we've had on to talk about basketball before. I won't name any names, but maybe we can reach out and see who we can get in here. And also ClemsonKickoff.com. If we have any blog ideas that we just don't have time to write down, we'll be sure to get that there. And of course, hey, as the name might suggest, we'll have the kickoff times in case you need to look it up. So until next time, Reign Supreme All Way Podcast, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.